To the Lincolnshire Fens. Railway bridges are a bit scarce out here, but there's a heck of a lot of open space. Not much good being a tree hopper.
So this is it, Journey's End. This is where, in theory, our squirrel could have ended up. Next stop, the continent. But after all those hundreds of miles of woods, all that leaping from tree to tree, the squirrel, like me, could have arrived here, looked around and said to himself, was it really worth the effort?
I was very young, obviously, I was 6, and didn't quite understand about land reclamation. You know, just all I knew was that this was an area that was once covered by water, and that somehow now it wasn't.
That was Jeremy Lishman's first impression of the flatlands. He's since moved back to the home counties, but is constantly drawn to his adopted homeland of Lincolnshire. A professional photographer and musician who sees beauty where others see absolutely nothing.
Well, I actually like all the seasons, really. There's something about each season which appeals to me, and the work I do is about documenting the seasons and the way that the landscape changes through the year. There's nowhere else quite like it in Britain to the extent that it's a man-made landscape, and it's basically changed beyond all recognition to what it once was.
This is where the Fens actually begin. A waterland sloping down to the Wash, where medieval barons grew rich on fish and poultry until the land was drained and their livelihoods vanished. The Saxons, the Romans, and John Sardison's family, several centuries later, realised the wisdom of pitching camp on higher ground along Fen Edge.
It's higher than the Fens, not easily flooded.
We're about 30 feet above sea level, I gather.
Right.
I can feel my ears popping. The Norman church is practically in John's garden. Although the population of Howell is only 30, the Harvest Thanksgiving was an all-ticket affair, attracting 40 worshippers. The harvest was wheat, potatoes, sugar beet and barley, not a Swede in sight.
You go back to the four-course rotations, which is, you know, long since gone, and indeed in those days they had sheep to eat the Swedes, or the turnips, whichever. We have a few sheep, but you don't see many sheep in the Fens now. You don't see many animals at all.
But you do see plenty of these, the more traditional Lincolnshire church spire, built to stand out like a bandaged nose. St Andrews in Heckington has another skyscraper alongside, the only 8-sail windmill left in Britain. When the original 5 blew off in a thunderstorm over 100 years ago, a new set was transferred from Tuxford Mill in Boston. Willie, or Villy, the station master, came from a little further afield, Prussia, as it was called when he left it during the war.
I worked on a railway 18 years. And I worked 11 years on this track as a plate layer, and I have a little bit of connection from the German side. My relatives been train drivers, inspectors, and had a lot to do with the railway.
Fenland accent almost threw me there. Absorbed into Heckington life now, though, is Villy, a parish councillor and a tireless campaigner for the restoration of a double-track service all the way from Sleaford to Boston.
When they cut that track down to one-line track here from Heckington to Sleaford, and from Hubbard's Bridge to Boston, and further on is Frisney towards Skegness. If any breakdowns is down on that single track, is a stoppage. We try to get everything back again, and every time the top management comes here to Heckington, I say, for goodness, I get you figures together and get it in a proper way and run the railway how it used to be.
The British seaside and the way it used to be for me. I was conned as a child. Idyllic books created a world of rock pools and crabs, golden beaches and a blue sea full of dancing waves. This is what I got, the east coast of England. This group hope the weather stays fine during their trip to the Lincolnshire coast. They're just outside Skegness, but they haven't come for a holiday. They're at Gibraltar Point to study moths and butterflies. Like me, they like it warm and dry.
This is a species called the buff tip, and as you can see, it's exactly like a birch twig, really uncanny in its art of disguise. And so to a bird, this would appear to be a dead piece of wood.
David Brown's students are drawn here like moths to a candle. Although my unfortunate childhood experiences have left me loathing the place, I cannot deny that it's a paradise for moth lovers. For here, by the wash, is an almost perfect mixture of habitats. There are sand dunes, but with fields nearby. Salt and freshwater marshes lie almost side by side. There's even a small wood, the final resting place for our imaginary squirrel on his leap from the Severn to the Wash. So, it's not surprising that around 80 species of moth can be trapped on an average night. And neither is it surprising that it's the real moth and butterfly freaks who join the course. Yes, she's been in that wood, she's seen that butterfly, and she bought the shirt.
I just think they're fabulous. I mean, I've brought my mum on this course as well.
Really?
Yeah, to try and get her a bit more interested in them.
It's incredibly beautiful, but I have to say that there's something about moths. I don't know why. I mean, I love butterflies, but I get a bit funny about moths. Maybe it's because they come out at night.
Yes, I think a lot of the general public don't appreciate the true beauty of moths because they don't have the opportunity to see such beautiful insects. And really, to me, they're as fascinating, if not more so, than butterflies.
He's beginning to convince me. As night falls, they lay the moth traps. A mercury vapour light bulb attracts the moths in. Dazed and dazzled, they cannot escape.
Well, the conditions are quite good in that Gibraltar Point is a very exposed place, as you already know.
Yeah.
And tonight there's hardly any wind, so I'm very hopeful of a good catch of moths. The only drawback is there's a very clear sky.
Which means it will be cold. Bad news for moth collectors and reporters.
The time now is 9:20. While they're setting the traps, we're going to go off down the pub and have a pint, because there's no point coming back to the traps until it's really dark, which should be in about an hour and a half's time.
It was cold. Huddled round a bleak moth trap light, it was difficult to imagine any creature would want to venture out at such an hour in such a temperature. We waited a long time to get a shot of a moth entering the trap. So what would the morning bring? And what chance had we tomorrow of finding any butterflies?
No, we've never been down this road, have we? No. We've passed here dozens of times, not down this road. You and I haven't done a bike. No.
They may not be very good for squirrels, but the fens are ideal for this sort of thing. Nothing unusual on the face of it about a bicycle made for two.
For the tractor ahead, oh gosh, it's just a question of which way he turns.
Cyril didn't know anything about the tractor because he's been blind since catching German measles at the age of 2. It didn't prevent his becoming one of the leading craftsmen in the county.
I earned my living. I had to work 12 hours a day to do it, but I did it from 1946 up until 1964 when plastics took over.
Baskets made from traditional Lincolnshire willow were used for setting and lifting potatoes, for collecting eels, prawns and cockles, and naturally in the spring and autumn at the height of the bulb season.
When I first started in 1946, I did 2,000 potato baskets a year for one person alone.
So was that a decent living?
Oh yes, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad for those times, no.
Cyril and his wife Audrey, who's also blind, managed to bring up 4 children they've never seen, of course. They tied bells to their feet when they were toddlers. All are fully sighted, thank goodness, as indeed are the 6 grandchildren.
You don't see them in detail, you sort of, I don't know, you see them in your mind's eye, really, what they're like.
And that's just as vivid.
it might not be right, but it's just as vivid, yes.
We both went to boarding school, same boarding school up in York, and we always go to the annual reunion, and we were there one weekend. And we were trying to find somewhere to have some tea, trying to find a cafe. Of course, my wife had a little bit of sight then when we were first married, but it's gradually deteriorated. And she looked in this window, she said, yeah, she said, this is a cafe, definitely a cafe. So we went in and sat down, and we sat down for 2 or 3 minutes, and I got a little bit agitated, and the gentleman came across and he said to me, can I help you, sir? So I said, yes, have we got a menu or something, because we'd like to eat. So he said, the menu? He said, I'm sorry, he said, you sat in the window of an antique shop.
It's all right for him to tell you my funny mistakes, but me has them as well. He was coming home from Nottingham. He was bringing a friend home for the weekend, and they had to wait a long time at Grantham for the next train. So he said, oh, let's go out and have a pint then. He said, I think I'll find a pub, although Grantham was a strange town to him, and it wouldn't have happened in Boston anyway. They went along and, oh, I think there's a pub here, it smells like one. And they heard money rattling, and they went in and they went to this bar. Oh, it's a pub all right. And so I said, could I have 2 pints, please? And the man behind the bar said, sorry, sir, this is a bank.
Touché. Although you can get Banks's ale. Cyril won't make that mistake on the road because he has a very good pilot.
When I first got the tandem, I used to go in, I kept it in my shed, and I used to go and sort of stroke the thing, caress it like one might a woman, you know. Oh, I should love to take her out in my own. That's the thing you know, and sometimes now, the only time I really do get depressed, I think, is when, say, Mark's away for a fortnight and then I can't get anybody else to go out with me.
Do you know what they're planning next? A 350-mile rally between Johannesburg and Durban. Makes you feel kind of humble, doesn't it?
Back at Gibraltar Point, it's morning and time to examine the night's harvest of moths.
Have a look at the first egg tray. And we can see, first of all, a smoky wainscot moth.
The traps we saw last night in the sand dunes have collected a few moths because they were exposed to the cold air. But here in the more sheltered woods is a real and rare treat. Goodness me.
Enormous male privet hawk moth. Now this is the largest resident British moth. And in fact this is only the second time this species has been recorded here at Gibraltar Point Nature Reserve.
He stole the show, overshadowing the 40 or so other species collected overnight. But what about the butterflies? Well, our intrepid enthusiasts set off armed with nets, but it was dull and it was cool. But look, could it be? Yes, after a great deal of patience, at long last, one butterfly.
And another, as our eventful pilgrimage comes to an end where it began in April, at the coast. Well, if, like me, you enjoyed many happy hours on Skegness Beach as a youngster, you'll know that it was one thing reaching the east coast, but quite another reaching the sea, especially when the tide was out. Needed a donkey to get you there. But those summary thoughts bring to a close the current series of Heart of the Country. If you've enjoyed it half as much as we have, you'll be with us again in the new year. But in the meantime, it's bye-bye from us all.
If you want to know more about the places seen, or if you'd like to follow up any ideas from this week's programme, send an A4 self-addressed envelope with a first-class stamp to Heart of the Country, Fact Sheet number 13, Box 96, Birmingham B1, 2JL.